to Part of Cultura, Episode 1. This is the Latinx Film and Theater Association of UCLA's official podcast. My name is Natalia,
My name is Mariah.
And I'm Alan.
and this is going to be like a weekly podcast where we talk about, anything, mostly, I guess, film and theater related, since we are a film and theater org. But since we are in times of COVID and we cannot physically be in the same room as other people, we have decided to do this podcast. So all three of us are in completely different locations, but we're still trying to put out some production for the org and just try to make it work. So we'll see how this goes. So now to learn a little bit more about our three hosts for today. Every week we're going to have different hosts, but today, like you heard, it's me, Mariah, and Alan. So, Alan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Alan, as Natalia said, and I said a couple of times. I am a sophomore at UCLA. I am in the Latinx Film and Theater Association. I'm hoping to major in communications with a minor in film, TV, and new media. And yeah, I don't know what else you want to hear.
All right, that's awesome. All right, go ahead, Mariah.
So like I said, my name is Mariah. I'm from Palmdale, California, which is like an hour north of LA. I live on a ranch. My major is English, and I'm hopefully minoring in professional writing and film. And I'm also a sophomore.
My name is Natalia. I am a sophomore at the UCLA Film School. So I'm majoring in film and television and digital media, and I'm hoping to minor in Chicano studies. I'm from San Jose, California, which is pretty far from LA. So I miss LA. And yeah, so let's get into our podcast. So like we said, today we're probably going to talk about topics film related. So what better way to start that off than to talk about the Oscars? Yay! Everybody knows the Oscars, but not everybody really knows how it works. And right now I'm like, oh, speak for yourself, because honestly, I don't know how it works, but we're gonna explain why. So let's get like a feel for our general feelings of the Oscars. So if anyone wants to jump in, just be like, how do you feel about the Oscars? Like, what are your understandings of the Oscars?
Personally, I've never really been interested in watching the Oscars. It's never been something that I've been like so excited to hear like about the nominations or I guess the winners, because I feel like it's very disappointing if you're if you're somebody who wants to see representation for your underrepresented group.
Well, at least for me, I have watched the Oscars a couple of times. And the thing about me is I was never able to enjoy them because I usually never watched the movies that were like up for awards. I think that's a problem with it for me, is that most of the movies that were nominated for the Academy Awards, they were usually never playing at my local theater, so I wasn't able to watch them. So maybe I would have watched one or two, so I couldn't really relish what the Oscars was about and what they were talking about. That's why I feel like most of the times it was kind of boring for me. And watching it now is just it's just very glamorous. And in our communities, at least in mine, it's like the opposite of glamorous. So it's kind of weird seeing that those two contrasts.
I definitely agree with Alan that there's a sense of like disconnection between how I personally grew up and what goes on in the Oscars, what it looks like, who's featured, who's nominated, and what's nominated and stuff like that. And like Mariah had mentioned, I didn't really enjoy watching the Oscars because don't really know the movies mentioned. Like I remember one year, like when I first started to figure out that I was like really into like the art of filmmaking and stuff, I like decided to watch the Oscars, and then my sister was like, "What movie is that?" And I was like, I have no idea. Like I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Like I've never heard of these movies. Obviously, I'm not being like, "Oh, these suck," because I've never seen them. I'm sure that they're wonderful pieces of art and a lot that goes into them and stuff like that. But there's just this like overwhelming sense of disconnection to the point where I don't care about like what goes on. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the representation that we see in award shows such as these. And like how like the actors that are winning and the directors that are winning and the writers and all that, for the most part, I think it's safe to say that they don't look or sound like us, and that we're just speaking for, Latino creatives, and there's so many other underrepresented groups that I think it's safe to say they feel the same. And although, like, yes, it's like a very high-end thing that I feel that a lot of other types of creatives are being left out from, it'd still be nice to see, for example, Latino creatives be recognized for their contributions in film and just kind of like, in a way, amplify their work and not just have it be like a small percentage of all the nominations of every single category. I think that'd be something that we should work towards, and that's something that I would personally like to work towards. I mean, that's why I'm trying to get into this industry. And I mean, I'm still young and I still have so much to learn, but that's like what I hope to see in the future. So, kind of going off of that, they have recently implemented new diversity requirements for the Academy Awards. So, if anybody wants to explain that, go ahead.
There's a lot to it, but I think it all just like kind of falls short of of the bare minimum. It's like barely the bare minimum. There's four standards: standard A, standard B, standard C, and standard D. And the films that are going to be nominated for Best Picture have to meet all four of these standards. And inside the standards, there are different options that fulfill that standard, if that makes sense. So, kind of jumping to standard A, the film has to have at least one lead or significant supporting character to be part of an underrepresented ethnic or racial group. That doesn't mean that that's the only thing you can do to fulfill standard A. You can also 30% of the actors must fill two of these categories, which are women, racial or ethnic groups, LGBTQ plus, or actors with disabilities. Or if you don't want to do that, you could tell a story that deals with one of those categories, which is a story about women, racial or ethnic groups, LGBTQ plus, or people with disabilities. That's just standard A. So you have a lot to pick from with standard A.
So, hold on, I have a question for like
Yeah, go
clarification.
ahead.
So, you have like the options for standard A are either to feature someone that falls under those, descriptions or make a story about that.
Yeah. So the
So,
first
Or you could have supporting like 30% of the supporting actors be in that
yeah.
group.
so to me that's a little funny because it's like, oh, if I don't want to feature people like that, let me just make a story about that and not include people that fall under
Yeah.
that category.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I feel like when upon reading that, I just kept on thinking about I guess the majority of filmmakers that are being nominated for like the Oscars and people in the industry is obviously dominated by white men. And so I was just thinking about like how are they actually going to approach these standards? Like if they do take the route where they're actually I guess trying to make an effort or pretending to try to make an effort, if they make a story about like an underrepresented group, but like not use those people or like fall under the trope of like white saviorism, which we like generally usually always see with those types of movies. Or I don't know, like upon reading that, I was just upon reading the standards, I was just kind of like disappointed. And I also kept on thinking about like the loopholes that I think they would try to overcome instead of like actually trying to change their movies or the content of their movies. They could like technically they could have like let's say like a supporting actresses that are like white women and then like maybe like somebody who falls into another like underrepresented group like or like let's say like they mention that somebody's like LGBTQ but like don't expand upon that story or like how white people do that thing where they're like oh like I'm Native American but they're
Mhm.
like very distant Native American. Or like for example, like Noah Centineo, like he like straight up lied for most of his career that because of his agent told him to say that he was Latino because he would get more roles. And so that's just kind of what I was thinking about how directors would go about this and how it just kind of seems like a joke to me.
Yeah, I've heard people complaining about this, about especially like standard A, like, oh, what if I want to make a movie from the 1920s or whatever, where it was like very white and stuff, like, and my actors like all need to be white or whatever because of historical accuracy. And that's just stupid because you don't have to put all these other actors in there. Like, it's the bare minimum. You can have a white actor who is part of the LGBTQ plus community in that movie playing a straight man, and that's it. That they fulfill that requirement. He's a straight man in the film, but in real life he's part of the LGBTQ plus community, but that isn't even mentioned in the film. So you can still make those types of movies if you still want to make those types of movies. So it's like the bare minimum, and they're complaining about this.
That complaint to me, it's kinda, like, funny because I've seen many futuristic films that the cast is, like, totally whitewashed.
Yeah.
I think it's the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix, but it takes place in the future and literally just looking for someone of, like, ethnic or racial background. I was like, "Okay, what's going on here? Like, what part of the world are we supposed to be in? What year are we supposed to be in?" Like, I was just so confused, and I was like, "Where is everybody else that, I see on a normal daily basis? Like, what happened to all of them in the future?" Because when you make a film, you're in control of the story, and when you make that decision to leave out such a large demographic of people, like, that's why a lot of people are upset. And the fact that people are upset at people being upset, like, that's, uh I don't wanna say it's, like, funny, but it's just kinda like, why, you know?
Yeah, it's just frustrating.
Yeah, but what are the other standards, Alan, for you said standard A, and then there's a few
Yeah.
more.
So now we're moving on to standard B. Standard B, you have three options, and you only have to fulfill one of the three options. So one of them is two of these like very important jobs on set must be from the underrepresented group again, which is women, a racial or ethnic group, LGBTQ plus community, or disabled people. So two of the jobs, which are these, must be held by one of those people in the underrepresented group. So a casting director, a cinematographer, a composer, costume designer, director, editor, hairstylist, makeup artist, producer, production designer, set decorator, sound, VFX supervisor, or a writer. So just two of those jobs need to be fulfilled by someone from the underrepresented group. That's just one of the options. You don't even have to do that. That's just one of the options. The
Mhm.
second option for standard B is that you must have at least six people from the underrepresented group again working in the crew or in the team or in technical positions, and that excludes PAs. So just, working in the crew, which is I think very simple to do. And then the third option is 30% of the film's crew must be from the underrepresented group again. So these are like very simple, very easy options to fulfill.
Yeah, and it doesn't really give much power to the underrepresented groups because obviously like if you have people from those underrepresented groups like especially with technical positions, even though you have underrepresented people in those positions, there's not really much they can do as far as like the story or as far as like who actually gets on the screen. And I mean that's a big part of representation, showing people that like look like you and look like members of your community on the big screen, which I think is like super important. And also like if they had like standards that were more like I guess trying to encourage people to have those of underrepresented groups in higher positions where they did have more control over like let's say casting or over the cinematography and like such like and things like that, I feel like that would actually make more of a difference. But because of the different options, I feel like many of the directors are just going to opt for the things that are just easier
Yeah.
easier to accomplish and don't really have that much influence over their very white movies.
Yeah, I like what you were saying, like the fact that the crew is going to be 30% from the underrepresented group, I don't think that's really going to help with the problem of underrepresentation in film. I think that where we do need representation is up on top, like you said. We need representation from the gatekeepers who are mostly all white males who stop movies from being made, who stop ideas, who stop creatives from entering the industry and putting their own vision because they think that, oh, the white audiences aren't going to want to see that, or the general audience isn't going to want to see that because that's what they think the general audience looks like. They think the general audience looks like them, a white male, but everyone knows that the general audience is very diverse. So they're the people who are stopping these stories and stopping people from actually getting their stories done.
Like you guys were saying about the just like how important it is to have not only representation in front of the camera, but also behind the camera and behind the scenes and all that. I had written a research paper about this actually when I was a junior in high school about the misrepresentations of specifically Latinos in
Mhm.
Hollywood. So how old is a junior in high school? Like 17? 16, 17?
16, 17, yeah.
Yeah, so, like,
16 maybe.
at 16, 17 years old, like, I wrote, like, a 20-page research paper in one of my classes about this, and, one of I just wanna bring up, like, a fact that I found while writing this paper is that a study conducted in 2016 of the racial makeup of the population of the city of Los Angeles stated that Latinos make up 49% of the Los Angeles community. However, when it comes to Hollywood, Latinos make up just 2.3% of directors, 2.2% of producers, and 6% of writers. I don't think anybody needs to be
Insane.
like a mathematician to like see the problem there. Hollywood is based in this county or this area of California where Latinos make up a large part of the population. And for them to only make up that little percent of, what goes into Hollywood, it's almost like you're actively avoiding those people. So, I guess to explain that in, like, a metaphorical way, like, if you had a bag filled with a bunch of marbles and 49% of them are blue, blue representing the Latinx population at this time, 2016, in Los Angeles, and the rest of the marbles were just different colors, which represent the different ethnicities of the other people that make up Los Angeles, and you reach in and you grab some marbles and you grab a bunch of them, and none of them or a very small percentage of them are blue marbles. I would think that you're actively trying to avoid picking up those blue marbles because it just doesn't make sense that, these people, like Latinos, they grow up in, like, the neighborhoods or, like, the backlots of these big production studios, and they still somehow are still fighting for access to be included in this type of, field.
Definitely. Okay, I wanna ask you a question. Do you think a reason why there's many reasons why we're underrepresented in the industry, but do you think one of the reasons is that a lot of us come from a lot of our parents are in the working class,
Mhm,
um, they work really hard to give us, a great life. That's the case for me and my parents. My parents are immigrants, and they came to this country for a better life, and they're fighting every day to make sure that happens. I feel like a lot of Latinx people do want to be creative and work in the creative field and work in the industry, but there's just so much risk tied to that because we do not have our parents to fall back on if we do not make it. We can't just give up everything and pursue that because we don't have that financial security behind us. Um, we know that we need to get a job that will certainly pay us enough to live, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely think that's a part of it. And also like thinking about it too, when you think of Hollywood, I feel like so much of it relies on your connections to the industry as well. So, like let's say like most of us who are like children of like immigrants or people that are just barely starting their lives here in the US. I mean, obviously like none of them know like a director who's in Hollywood or none of them know like casting directors and such like that. And I feel like a lot of times with those who are in the industry, it's like oftentimes the case where it's like that's their way in to the industry of like having these like past connections or like their parents are like a director or another actor. And so I feel like that also kind of plays a role into it as well.
do agree with that, Alan. When I was a senior in high school and I was choosing like what I wanted to major in, for the longest time, I did not tell anybody that I had applied to film schools because I had this like fear that I would be ridiculed and like people would be like, okay, well, what's the plan if that doesn't work? Like, if I were to be like, oh, I'm going to study something in the STEM field, I feel like a lot of people wouldn't try to talk me out of it because 'cause they're just like, "Okay, go ahead, secure the money bag or whatever."
Yeah.
Definitely.
But for literally for the longest time, I had told people that I was going in as undecided,
Mhm.
and especially my parents, because they knew that I liked to make films and do this whole video production thing. And I
Yeah.
remember, like, at one point, my dad asked me, like, he was just like, "Is that just like a hobby or like are you trying to do something with it?" And I was just like, "No, it's just a hobby." Like, I was like just trying to make him feel better. So I didn't really tell anybody, not even my teachers, because for some reason in high school I was really good at math. So they thought I was going
For
to do
some reason.
they thought I was gonna do, something in math. I say that because now you give me a math problem and I have no idea how to solve it. But, like
Definitely.
yeah, so I feel like my teachers were, like, counting on me to be, like, this Latina in STEM, which is totally awesome. Like, Latinas in STEM, like, are amazing. Both my sisters are in STEM right now. But I knew that I didn't wanna do that for the rest of my life. And, like, I wanted to be creative, but, like, I didn't really have any type of creative outlet when I was a kid. So
Uh-huh.
I was just like it was really hard for me to, like, commit to this, and it wasn't until I got into UCLA for the film school is that's when I started to tell people, like, "Oh, like, I got into UCLA for film," and then that's when I realized that actually I had a lot more support than I thought, but just because that initial thought of that I would be looked down upon as, like, this not being able to provide a steady source of income, like, if all
Yeah.
goes wrong, like, that's what scared me so much, and you know what? I was an 18-year-old kid and people expected me to know what I wanted to do, so, like, it was just, like, crazy, but, I mean, once I told, like, my dad, like, he was super excited for me, and it was just a reaction that I kinda just did not expect, and he was, like after that, he was, like, all into it, like, he would look up facts about, like, filmmaking stuff, like, "Did you know this?" Like, and, like, "Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho," like, this and this, and I was like, "Oh, like, he's so cute, like, look at him supporting me and all that." But I do feel that, like I feel like a lot of Latinos are afraid to come into a field like this. One, because of, like we said, the family background of, who we are and stuff like that. And another one is because we don't see a lot of Latinos out there. So, my goal is to be for like a younger Latino to say like, "Oh, she could do it, then I could for sure do it." Like,
Yeah.
let's go. Yeah.
I kinda have a story like that too. I wanted to be in film since I was, like, a little kid, since I was, like, 10 or 9 years old. And that's what I wanted to do. And, I would tell my parents, like, "Oh, that's what I wanna do," you know? And my dad was always like, "No, that's kind of more of a hobby, like, you should,
Mhm.
like, go for something that will, like, give you, like, a good income." And, he wasn't doing it out of spite, he was doing it because he cared about me, he didn't wanna see me struggling for money, he knew that I had what it took to get a good job. So he's all like, You can do all that film stuff on the side, but you should focus on making a career out of something." And, he would tell me that all the time because, he also knew that if I took that route and I were to fail, which, like, he wasn't saying I was gonna fail, but, the chance of making it in the industry is very, very, low. But he said, or he didn't say, but I knew that if I were to fail and, like, not have, like, a steady source of income, like, he wouldn't be able to support me off of his income either. So, I took that into consideration too, and going into high school, I went to an engineering school because I really, really wanted to be an engineer, or not really, I kind of wanted to be an engineer, and I thought that was the right path and, like, to do film on the side. And my junior year, I realized that I don't wanna be an engineer. That was kind of something that my dad was, like, pushing on me, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, like, I don't really care." and I noticed that I wanted to do advertisement and marketing and somehow tie that with film. So that was, I think, the best path for me, at least for me, to kind of like make a career out of something, but something that's kind of very close to film, to still have that opportunity and to still explore all that stuff.
Yeah, similarly as well. Like I mean like I never really like there were really no film programs where I was or like any film classes that I could take growing up, I guess. Especially like in high school, like there weren't really like lots of opportunities or like I think there was like a film club, but it wasn't really active. But there was just no opportunity for me to learn. I mean, I went to college as like a comparative literature major, and even then, like people were like, "Oh, like what are you gonna do with that?" And I was like, "I don't know, like I'll figure it out." and then, um, and then like I guess I decided to let myself explore a little bit and explore like interests that I things that I was interested in, but like wasn't really sure I was good at. So I mean, like with film, I ended up joining the Latinx Film Theater Association. Go LFTA.
Nice.
But
That's what.
yeah, and like that's where I mean, like I'm still learning like so much and I still have like so much to learn from like, everybody else who's like definitely more experienced than I am. And it's like just really interesting to see like, to be behind the set, like be on the set, like even if it's just like there to like hold up lighting for like hours. Um but
The
yeah, like
best lighting person.
Yeah, you were a very important part of that film.
light up your lives, guys. But but yeah. So I mean like I'm an English major, but because I'm like minoring in film, I'm hoping that like like I still am able to learn more about the industry and network with other creatives through like our association, of course. But also just like with English, I feel like that gives me the opportunity to like I guess work on my writing skills that like I could build upon for like let's say like screenwriting or like different things in the business because I am also minoring in professional writing, and so like
Mhm.
there's like different things that you can do with that where you're doing like entertainment writing and things like that. So I feel like even though like I don't think I'd ever make the jump to be like a film major because like I just think that's like too much of a risk for me because I don't know if that's exactly what I want to do, but because it is an interest, I'm trying to find like ways to I guess like still be able to have something that I can fall back on, like let's say English with like if I wanted to do journalism or some sort of other writing in different fields and stuff. I don't know. I just feel like it's very versatile, but also trying to keep myself open to different opportunities and being able to chase after these passions that I am interested in. Cause yeah, like it's like we're only like I mean, I'm only like 19 years old. I'm assuming that you guys are like 19, 18-ish.
19, yeah.
But
19, yeah.
yeah, and it's like, how are we supposed to decide like what we want to do for the rest of our lives if we don't have that opportunity to like explore and see like what else is out there and I guess like dot our I's and cross our T's on the different things that we think that we're interested in and see where it leads. But
I also wanted to talk about, I think how Alan had mentioned that about the reason that a lot of people, or specifically us, that we did have that fear of, pursuing this creative field is that, if all goes bad, like we don't have that financial stability to fall back on. And I remember when I was like looking to see what I wanted to do, I would find a lot of videos on YouTube and all of them were like, "Do you really need film school?" And of course all of them were like, "No." Like it's like but and it's just like they're just like, "Just make films by yourself." I'm like, "Okay, but like where's all that money gonna come from?" Because it's like,
uh-huh.
every piece of equipment that I have purchased myself, and I don't know if that's the same for, like, other people and stuff like that. So, obviously, a lot of budget stuff, entry level stuff, but it's like, I decided to go to film school because, they're gonna teach us about making the connections and stuff like that, which if I would not have come to UCLA for this, I feel like I would be so lost and I would just be discouraged and, give up. And then that's when it would become a problem. But I'm not
Mhm.
saying this to be like everybody should go to film school, but it's like, how it's like my story is going to be way different than, that one person that's like don't go to film school and just like ask to borrow money and like, like stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I guess should we
We should get
loop
back
it
to
back? Yeah.
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 We went on a whole
Um,
tangent.
Alright, so now that we've gone on this entire tangent, which I mean, I guess is a good thing because you learn a little bit more about ourselves. I learned more about you guys learned more about
Yeah.
me,
Mhm.
whoever is listening to this, you know. So I guess let's bring it back to
The
the Oscars
standards.
and the standards. We're back at the standards, you guys, you know.
So we just finished standard B, which led us to that tangent. Okay, so now we're going to move on to standard C. They get a lot simpler, the last two standards. So standard C says that the film company who is distributing the film must offer paid apprenticeships or apprenticeships. I don't know how to say it, or internships. And they also must train the people in the underrepresented communities. They must train and offer them work opportunities. So what do you guys think about those two?
I think like same thing with like the standard before of having like there's so much flexibility and I guess like what type of roles they're training them for. It could be like from like let's say like offering them opportunities to like learn more about like directing or like mentorship from like directors or whatever. But also like that could even just like internships and apprenticeships could also just be like I guess more minor or like technical roles on the film and like I
Mhm.
said before, I feel like that also gives them the opportunity to just keep like working around and not giving these people like opportunities for I guess to actually make an impact on the industry and like make their own films and have more creative direction with it. And so I don't know. I think it's pretty obvious that the way that I'm feeling a little bit like pessimistic or like cynical about like what these standards are, but just
Same.
because it's like I feel like because of how long people have gone, along with this industry and how even today in like 2020, it's still hard to get films made about underrepresented groups that aren't like falling into different stereotypes or aren't like as big a budget or as advertised as like or highly regarded as other films that are made by like white filmmakers with a cast of like all white actors. It's just I'm having trouble like thinking about how that will actually how people are actually going to try to change their actions when there's so much flexibility for them to just not and continue in their own ways.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll defend like the optimistic because I'm a very optimistic person. Like we said, I think a lot of the if these film companies ships are, I think most of the time we kind of have the idea where they're gonna skew of who they're gonna pick because these people have connections or because people have done that. I think offering it to underrepresented people, I think it gives us a better shot to finally get at least our toe in the door. A lot of people say our
Mhm.
foot in the door, but this is a very tiny step, but at least it's your toe, you have your toe through the door. Um,
That's true.
but I think if you have an internship and if you can impress people, I think stuff can start from that. Or and just having connections and building up your network of people who you know in the industry. I think that's a very important part. And I feel like that's what this is trying to do. But like you said, Mariah, I feel like they can manipulate it or not necessarily take advantage of what it's supposed to do.
Like Maria said, like this pessimistic view, I think it has to do with the fact that we haven't seen it done before. And like Hollywood has been a thing for a very long time. And so a lot of us are skeptical about this new things because we literally just haven't seen it yet. Like we haven't seen it put in place yet because it's
Yeah.
been this long. And that's why like I think that this like I would call these requirements just like a long overdue bare minimum. Like
No,
it's
definitely. I think that
it's
too.
Mhm.
so I think that's where like the pessimistic attitude comes from. But I mean, it is something that I would love to see that everything that I hope for underrepresented groups in Hollywood, like I'd love for see more representation, like correctly portrayed, written by people who know what it's like, not just in front of the camera, but also behind the camera, have those people in there.
Yeah. So we'll move on to standard D. Standard D is more representation in marketing, the distribution, and the publicity representation of these films, which is for me, that's perfect because that's kind of what I want to do. I kind of want to do marketing, distribution, or publicity for the film industry. So that's kind of like a big win for me. But again, are they going to do it like to the full extent? Are they going to? I guess what I'm saying is, are they gonna use this opportunity to, like, its full extent, or are they gonna, again, just continue to do the bare minimum?
Mhm.
Yeah, so those were the standards that they must fulfill, and again, in the first 2 standards, they had a lot of options that kind of give them a lot of loopholes to work with, and yeah, so those are our views on the new diversity requirements for the Oscars.
I guess to wrap up, like, the Oscar thing, I would like to see it come to a point where we don't have to ask people to include us in their projects. Like, I want
Mhm.
it to be, like, a given. Like, they're just like, "Okay, well, let's make our characters inclusive," and stuff like that. Like, cause like, to have this written out in paper and people complaining about it, this shouldn't be a burden to anybody. It
Exactly.
it really shouldn't be a burden at all. If anything, it's been a burden to underrepresented communities to be like, "When am I going to be the next lead?" or whatever, or the next writer, the next director, and stuff like that. So, overall, it just should be a given that we shouldn't even be having to, like, have conversations like this where we're like, "Please, pretty
Yeah.
please let us in,"
Mhm.
and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I would love to see it come to that point, and if I have to work towards that in the future and stuff like that, like, you bet your rump I will, so
I love that.
Now, technically, we didn't wrap up, that was a lie. We're gonna Now we're gonna talk about the 2021 Oscars and how this whole pandemic is kind of made this concept of the 2021 Oscars and how it's kind of up in the air because not a lot of things have been released. It's kind of like, the first year that these requirements are put into place, there's not many
Opportunities for
opportunities or like pieces of work for them to actually be applied to. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that would be interesting. So,
Have you guys seen any movies that you guys were like, "Oh, maybe that if there were a Oscars in 2021," have you seen any movies that do you think would be contenders for Best Picture?
I think that, I watched The Devil All the Time. It's on Netflix,
Nice. I
and
watched that one too.
that one was really good. It was, like, an all-white cast, which obviously, like, ticked me off, but, like, it was a good movie, like, I'm not gonna lie,
Have you
and
seen
I
it,
feel like
Natalia?
no, I've not even heard of it, honestly.
Oh,
oh my
wow.
gosh, it's like it had, like, an all-star cast, like, there was, like, Robert Pattinson, who is, like, the love of my life, Tom Holland,
Tom
Bill
Holland, yeah.
Skarsgård, who is also very attractive. Um,
Pennywise. Pennywise is in
Anyways,
it.
yeah, he's Pennywise,
This
um, but
I
yeah.
watched it, and it was very disturbing for me. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
good because it's supposed to make you feel disturbed, but it's just I thought of that movie too when I thought, "What movies have I seen in 2020 that might be up for Oscars?" The Devil All the Time is definitely one. It's on Netflix, so if you guys have Netflix, go watch it.
But
It's really
also
weird.
yeah, but also, yeah, trigger warnings, definitely, like, look up what kind of things what the content is in that film because there
Yeah.
is a lot of heavy content like rape, like mutilation and murder and, like, blood and such.
It's a crazy movie. It's about, like, the power of religion and how people might be, like, brainwashed.
Yeah, it was I really enjoyed it and the criticism it had on religion, and I think it was pretty I thought it was really ironic how, like, there was, like, some people, like, on IMDb, like, "Oh, this is such a horrible film for these actors to be a part of," like, and, how sinful or whatever it was, like, "Christianity is nothing like this," but I feel like that was the whole point of the movie where people, like, ignore that there are figures in the church that may not have the purest intentions because everybody's human, but
And
that's
who
besides
take
the point.
advantage of their
It was a
power.
really
Yeah.
good movie.
It was good. It was refreshing to see Tom Holland in a role like that because
Oh, yeah.
this movie's, like, very intense, and to see, like, Tom Holland not being, like he's Spider-Man, but he has, like, this range. It's crazy. Natalia,
Yeah.
I think you should see it. It's awesome.
I'll hop on my sister's Netflix account and
Yeah. It's an
yeah.
all-white cast, but it's kind of like an all-white story. It takes place in, like, Middle America. I don't know where it takes place. It
Yeah,
takes
like
place,
the
like, in
South. Yeah. Like,
yeah.
they could've thrown in, like, people of color because it's not like they didn't exist, but, like, it's fine.
Yeah, it's kind of like a small town story, stuff like that.
Mhm.
So, um, it was a good story. I have only seen 2 films that came out in 2020. How about you guys? I have them on the list because that's what I got this app, the Letterbox app, to keep track of the movies that I was gonna see in 2020, but the pandemic
Uh-huh.
had other plans.
Ooh, I honestly,
To
like, The Devil
Google
All the
that.
Time is, like, one of the only ones.
I have to Google movies released in 2020 because I
I
don't
know.
remember watching anything because honestly this year has been just a blur.
It has,
Mhm.
definitely.
So,
The other movie that I saw in 2020 was Onward, by Pixar. I
I
really
still
enjoyed
haven't
that one
seen
too
that.
because it
That's
was
That one
about
was really cute.
brothers. Yeah, it was about brothers and, like, I was just thinking about me and my brother. It's a really good I'm pretty sure that one would have been nominated for, like, the animation, feature film in the Oscars,
Yeah,
but those are the only
it
movies
was
I've
really
seen, so that's all I get to talk about.
I'm looking through the list of them and I've literally only seen The Invisible Man and Trolls World Tour.
Bruh.
I
Academy
Oh my god.
Award-winning films.
Academy Award-winning Trolls World Tour. Trolls World Tour, don't sleep on that movie, y'all. It's kinda
Oh, don't forget about The Kissing Booth too.
Oh my god. I have only heard of such a film, but I've never
It is
watched it.
horrible. Like,
I
the
haven't seen
like,
it
there's
either.
no way that film is getting nominated. Well, I mean, well, okay, there's definitely had to be, like, other things that were released. Like, I know, like, King of Staten Island was also released. I haven't watched it.
Yeah, I heard that one was
Tenet
really
was
good too,
released.
though.
Yeah, I've been wanting to see it because Pete Davidson is honestly, like, pretty good in those type of roles. I just think he's really
Mhm.
funny. Also, Tenet with, again, Robert Pattinson and,
Okay.
John David Washington.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I haven't seen it yet. I
I
really want
haven't
to.
seen that one too because I kinda wanna see it in theaters, but,
Me
there's
too.
no way I'm gonna go to a theater. And they're playing at a drive-in, but I wanna get, like, the real experience, but sadly, I cannot.
But yeah, so, I nominate Trolls World Tour for best
But, like,
um,
isn't it sad that we've only seen, like, a handful of films in 2020? It's just
yeah, all the other movies that I've watched have been like, I've rewatched them or they were released, like, a long time ago.
yeah, a lot of them
Mhm.
I've rewatched a lot of films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I am happy about is that the local drive-in theaters, like, in my city, they were gonna close it, like, last year, 2019, because they weren't getting
Mhm.
enough business, but now because of the pandemic and you can only go to a drive-in theater, they're, like, booming with business, so good for them.
Yeah, good
Thank
for the
you.
drive-in
Yeah.
theaters.
Good for the drive-in theaters. I
I was
love
taking
drive-in theaters.
a course, the history of film and TV or whatever, and the professor mentioned the drive-in theaters, and there was only, like, a handful left of them in, near Los Angeles, and I took a
Yeah.
picture of it, and I was like, "Boom," and there's one really close to my house, actually, so I've gone there a couple of times. It's a great experience.
Yeah, I love drive-in theaters. I think they're definitely if you haven't gone to one, you should go. It's super
Yeah,
fun.
I've
it's
never
so cool.
been.
You've never been?
No.
LFTA
I mean,
goes
there's
to a drive-in
no.
theater.
Yeah, I mean, I could go to, like, the Valley 'cause I also took that class on, like, the, history of film and TV, and he said that
Mhm.
most of them were, like, in the Valley, and, I mean, I have a lot of family there, and I can also, like, I can drive there. But yeah, definitely I need to do that sometime.
I also saw that one of the films is called I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and that one's on Netflix. I
Oh,
heard that one
yeah.
was good, but I have not seen it, but I
I
probably
I
will.
saw it, it was confusing, and also, like, I was reading, like, different articles on it, and basically it was saying that the director what's his I can't remember his name.
Charlie
The guy who
Kaufman.
did. Huh?
Charlie Kaufman or Koofman or
Yeah, Charlie Kaufman?
Kaufman, yeah.
Um, yeah, and so I was reading, like, that people were saying, like, you need to watch his different films, like, I know he's done, like, Eternal Sunshine of the
Mhm.
Spotless Mind, and other things like that because it plays into this, I guess, larger context of this large story about humans and, like, their narcissism and such like that. And so I haven't
Okay.
really seen much of his other films, but definitely, like, something that I'm considering. But it was really interesting. It was really interesting. It was very long. I know that my mom did not enjoy it, but also she doesn't really like those kind of, like, absurdist kind of movies where it's like very existential, like you don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that like definitely like it depends on the type of person you are and how into film you are or how much into those types of films you are. But that's definitely I think a potential one.
Have you guys seen Enola Holmes with
Oh,
Millie Bobby
No.
Brown?
I watched the last, like, 20 minutes because we were having, like, a movie night, and I got home from work, like, super late, and, like, because we have a projector and a screen, so we were watching it outside. So I
Mm.
watched, like, the last, like, 20 minutes. It was interesting. I was like, "Wow, that's the most I've heard Millie Bobby Brown speak," because her role in Stranger Things, she says, like, 2 words, like, the entire episode, like, she's just like, "Yes, Mike," like, the entire episode. So it was, like, refreshing, and also, I feel like I totally forgot that she was British, so I was like, "Oh," like
Yeah, I've seen Netflix advertise this movie like crazy. I mean, I follow,
Yeah.
like, the Netflix account on Instagram and, like, Netflix Film on Instagram, but they just kept on pushing and pushing it. I'm just not a fan of, like, not that I'm not a fan of the British, I love British people, but kind of like those, like, old British films, like, is that what this is?
I see what you mean, I definitely see what you mean, and
Like, you
Mhm.
I'm
get
also
me?
not a fan yeah, I'm also not a fan of, like I don't know how to describe it, but
It's like
I
rich
Period
definitely
British
pieces, right?
know
people back then.
like
Period pieces. I swear they're
Yeah,
called
there
like
we
period.
go. Yeah,
Yeah,
but, like,
it's
British
I'm not
period
into
pieces.
those types of movies either.
Like, I just find them so boring. Like
Yeah.
I, like, totally understood what you meant when you were, like, describing I was like, "I know what he's talking about, and I feel exactly the same." That's so funny. But, I mean, this one, I only watched the last, like, 20 minutes, and it seemed kinda interesting. I was lost the whole time, and I didn't wanna be like that one person that's like, "What's going on?" 'Cause, that's kind of annoying
I
in a
hate those
movie.
people too.
So I was
Yeah.
just, like, watching, and, I mean, it was cool. I really can't say much about it because I really don't know what it was about, so but yeah, I mean, my whole family was into it. Like, when I walked in, I was like, "Hi, guys." They were like, "Shh, shut up." I was like, "Oh, shit, okay."
Okay, that's a good sign. I'll put it on my list of stuff that I'm probably not gonna watch, but
But
It's
it'll be
it's
on
good
your
to have
list
it there. Yeah.
just in case.
alright, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are approaching the end of the podcast, is that correct?
I
That
think so
is
too.
correct.
Okay, so I just wanna say thank you everyone for watching. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, make sure to subscribe and give us a rating. Anyone else with some final thoughts and words?
Follow LFTA UCLA on Instagram because we have a few projects coming up that I'm excited to work on from the
Oh,
safety of our
yes.
home, obviously, because we're in the time of
Social distant
coronavirus.
projects.
Social distance projects that I'm excited about to see how we're gonna go about. So if you like this podcast, there's a whole bunch of us in the group. It's not just us three, and they're a very wonderful and talented bunch. So you should
Aw, thank
definitely
you.
see what we all have to offer.
And also, if you go to UCLA and you're Latinx and you're interested in film, look into joining our organization because we're going to be having opportunities for people to join in about a month or so, if I'm
I
correct.
Yeah.
think yeah, like late October, I believe.
So
Yeah.
just follow our Instagram page and we'll let you guys know. All the information will be there.
Thank you for joining us and for listening to us. And you know what? Trolls World Tour for Best Picture 2021.
Period.
Let's get the campaign started, everyone. Petition it.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.